Hello, welcome back to our last module for sensation perception. If you're following along with the textbook, it is unit 4 in Myers Psychology for the AP course, 3rd edition. And it's simply called the other senses because we've talked quite a bit about vision, a little bit about hearing, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the other senses. So the targets for your learning in this module, things you should kind of feel pretty good about understanding after you're done studying this module, are a little bit of an understanding about the sense of touch, being able to understand that biopsychosocial model and the influences that it has on our experiences of pain. You should read that biopsychosocial model should be familiar from Unit 1. You should be able to compare and contrast our senses of taste and smell, explain how we sense our body's position and movement, and discuss how sensory interaction influences our perception. Remember, this whole unit is about sort of the interaction of our sensation, how information is coming into our sensory system, and then how our brain perceives it. And we're going to be discussing a little bit about the concept of embodied cognition. So how do we sense touch? Our sense of touch is a mix of 4 basic and distinct skin senses. You can kind of think about it that way. Pressure, warmth, cold, and pain. And some of you might feel like one of those you might be more sensitive to some of them than other people, or you might be more sensitive to pain or pressure or warmth or cold compared to the others. And it's really interesting to think about that some of us are more sensitive to some senses than others. So how does the somatosensory cortex, you remember from Unit 3, the biological basis of behavior, we talked a little bit about the somatosensory cortex. How does that help us with the sense of touch? Well, in terms of, you can see where it is right there. And it wasn't, as it says on this slide, module 12. It's a section of the brain that receives incoming sensory information from our skin as well as our other senses. So in terms of the input, the left hemisphere receives input from the body's right side. In terms of output, the right hemisphere section controls the body's left side. So as you know, we learned about how the one side controls the other and vice versa within our brain. How is pain best understood? Well, our experience of pain reflects both that bottom-up processing and the top-down cognition, which is more of our perception being involved. Pain is a biopsychosocial event. The experiences of pain for the same kind of insult to our body or somebody else's body can vary widely from group to group and from person to person. You may notice, like within your own family or within your group of friends, you may be someone who is highly sensitive to any sort of pain, or you may be someone who has a fairly high pain threshold. Within our own family, we have varying levels of that, with my younger son seemingly having an unbelievably high threshold for pain, and my older son being a little bit different. Not having that same high threshold for pain. And that's been pretty consistent throughout their entire development. And there are also differences I've noticed within family members and my sisters and stuff like that. Throughout different experiences we've had, some of us have, higher pain tolerances than others. So there is some very wide experiences and sensations of pain and perceptions of pain. So how is pain a biopsychosocial event? Well, in terms, this is really blurry, I apologize. In terms of the biological influences, activity in the spinal cord's large and small fibers, that's what happens. There are genetic differences in endorphin production, and there's the brain's interpretation of the central nervous system activity. In terms of the psycho part, the psychological influences, the attention that's paid to the pain, the learning that you've had about pain in the past, your experiences, your expectations for, getting hurt and what you expect it to feel like. And then in terms of the sociocultural influences, the presence of others or the empathy from others, and the expectations for how you should behave, whether, depending on whether you're older or younger or male versus female, there are cultural expectations for how you're supposed to react in certain cultures based on having some sort of physical experience of pain. And all of those things, all of those three components, the biological, psychological, and sociocultural, all interact to combine and make your personal experience of pain. So how is pain biological? So sensory receptors called nociceptors, mostly in your skin, but they're also in other muscles and organs, detect hurtful temperatures, pressure, or chemicals. What is a pain circuit? So those sensory receptors, those nociceptors, strange word, respond to potentially damaging stimuli by sending an impulse to the spinal cord, which passes the message to the brain, which interprets the signal as pain. That's when you're like, ouch, oh my goodness, I stepped on that thumbtack. I just had that happen to me the other day. And yeah, it hurts for a really short time and then the pain goes away. So there are two different theories we're going to discuss in terms of pain. The first is the gate control theory of pain, which states that the spinal cord contains a neurological gate that blocks pain signals or allows them to pass on to the brain. The gate is opened by the activity of pain signals traveling up these small nerve fibers, and it's closed by activity in larger fibers, such as massaging or information coming in from your brain. So really, when you're trying to like massage around an injury or trying to distract yourself and not think about it, those things can really help. And they're based upon this gate control theory of pain. This is an interesting phenomenon, the phantom limb pain. The brain can create pain as it does in phantom limb sensations after a limb amputation. Without normal sensory input, the brain may misinterpret and amplify spontaneous but irrelevant central nervous system activity. So 7 in 10 such people feel pain or movement in non-existent limbs, which is really fascinating to think how that must occur due to this brain misinterpretation. So how is pain psychological? Pain is impacted by how much attention we give to it. That's hard to, that's kind of hard to wrap our heads around, right? There's a very psychological component to pain. And if you've ever been around young kids, have younger siblings, or done babysitting, you know that if a kid falls down and gets hurt, sometimes, often, one of the first things they'll do is sort of look up to see what the reaction of other people is. And if you, as an older child or older teenager or an adult, kind of look at them and we're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Kind of let them know they should be freaking out. Sometimes that will cause them to express more discomfort and feel like they're in more pain. But as a parent, I learned, you should be like, make sure they're okay, but be like, oh, I think you're going to be okay, because you can encourage them to sort of distract them a little bit and make them not feel as much pain. If we distract our minds with other thoughts, the pain can actually feel like it is diminished. So how else is pain psychological? Our memories of pain may be edited from the actual pain we felt. People overlook a pain's duration and recall two moments, the pain's peak moment and how much pain is felt at the end of a certain procedure. So as it's right there at the dentist, that would be a good example to be thinking about in terms of pain and how you remember it. Are you remembering the peak pain moment, or are you remembering just at the end? It wasn't too bad at the end. And they've done some research to show that if whatever's happening, whatever procedure is happening to you, if you can make it, if the doctor or whatever can make it so the pain is less at the end of the procedure, then in terms of the memory of it, it will seem like it was less painful looking back. So how is pain sociocultural? We tend to perceive more pain when others seem to be experiencing pain. As you can see in this picture, it's when other people are experiencing a lot of pain, we perceive more pain. How else? Well, we get cues on how to perceive pain from our culture's views on pain. Like I was saying, like how we should be, depending on who we are, gender and age and all those different kind of things, how we should be acting in terms of our experiences of pain. And sometimes that can be really problematic if you're not fitting right in with the cultural expectations of how you're supposed to respond to that pain. What are some methods for controlling pain? Well, pain control therapies can include things like drugs, surgery, acupuncture, electrical stimulation, massage, exercise, hypnosis, relaxation training, meditation, and thought distraction. Lots of different ways to try to control pain. Most people probably think a lot about the drugs or the surgery part of it, and less so about some of these other ideas here that can be helpful in controlling different types of pain. So there is some research that placebos, as we learned about in the research methods section, that placebos can actually help reduce pain. In an experiment, researchers pitted 2 placebos, fake pills, and pretend acupuncture. So fake pills versus pretend acupuncture against each other. People with persistent arm pain received either fake acupuncture with, I'm having trouble saying the word acupuncture, with trick needles that were retracted without puncturing the skin, or blue cornstarch pills that look like a medication, often prescribed for strain injury. So what were the results? Well, after 2 months, both groups were reporting less pain, but the fake acupuncture group reported a greater drop in pain. A quarter of those people who received the non-existent needle pricks and 31% of those who received the fake pills complained that there were side effects of such as painful skin or dry mouth. So it did show that placebos can work in reducing pain in some people. So how might distraction reduce pain? For burn victims undergoing painful skin repair, an escape into virtual reality can powerfully distract attention. And I've been seeing more and more about this use of virtual reality in treating pain, a really fascinating topic that we'll probably be seeing more and more of over the next decade. So the virtual reality reduces the pain and the brain's response to painful stimulation by this power of distraction. So switching gears a bit, what are the 2 chemical senses? Our sense of taste and our sense of smell. Taste is also known as gustation, and smell is also known as olfaction. So on the taste side, on the top and sides of your tongue are about 200 or more taste buds, each containing a pore that catches food chemicals. And some people are actually super tasters, that they taste things more strongly and they seem to have more ability to taste different tastes than others. In terms of smell, we smell something when molecules of a substance carried in the air reach a tiny cluster of receptor cells at the top of each nasal cavity. So what are the 5 basic tastes that we can detect? Probably the first 4 you're pretty aware of, sweet taste, salty taste, sour taste, and bitter taste. But there's also an umami taste, which has sort of been conceptualized as that taste that MSG, monosodium glutamate, gives to foods, which I seem to have an allergy to because it causes me significant headaches, and apparently that is not that uncommon. And this table here shows you some of the purported survival function of the basic tastes. So this is saying that tastes seem to exist for more than our pleasure. There's a reason that we have these sense of taste in terms of our evolutionary adaptations to the environment. So what foods can you think of? You could probably sit there and think about things that are sweet versus salty. You can conjure up in your mind the taste of something bitter. Maybe it's really strong dark coffee. I'm a big lover of really strong dark coffee, or things that are sour. I no longer eat those, but Sour Patch Kids, umami, as I said, with MSG, salty foods like bacon or chips, and then really sweet things. And you may be someone who feels like you crave one of those categories more than others. So how do we actually taste food? In each taste bud, pore, 50 to 100 taste receptors project these little antenna-like hairs that sense food molecules. This is where the chemicals in the food are transduced, again, that concept of transduction, to neural messages for the brain. Some receptors respond mostly to sweet-tasting molecules, others to salty, sour, umami, or bitter-tasting ones. Each receptor transmits its messages to a matching partner cell in your brain's temporal lobe. How does our sense of smell operate? So these 20 million olfactory, It's a good word to know. Olfactory, your sense of smell. Receptors respond selectively to the aroma of a cake baking, to the wisp of smoke, or to a friend's fragrance. This is where odors are transduced. Again, everything, all these things are coming into your brain, into your sensory system, and being in through the process of transduction, being changed into neural messages for the brain. Instantly, they alert the brain through their axon fibers. This is a good image of sort of the process of olfaction, of smelling of a rose and how it comes in through your nose, into your olfactory bulb, to higher regions of the brain. So you can see down here, it starts with step 1. These odorants sort of bind to receptors. Olfactory receptor cells are activated and send electrical signals. The signals are relayed via converged axons, and the signals are transmitted to higher regions of the brain. So what happens next? So sniffing swirls up air to the receptors, enhancing the aroma. The receptor cells send the messages to the brain's olfactory bulb, and then onward to the temporal lobes. This is sort of describing the whole overall process. Temporal lobe's primary smell cortex, and to the parts of the limbic system involved in memory and emotion. I'm sure all of you can think about certain smells that conjure up certain memories or emotions, like whether it's you walk into a place and something smells just like your grandma, or it smells, you know, the smell of a certain cake reminds you of a birthday party you went to that was an awesome time. You know, they can conjure up, it's amazing for me, you know, like to smell something that I hadn't smelled in a really long time, and how it can bring me back sort of emotionally and mentally to a place that I was decades ago. Fascinating process. So here's a little bit of an AP exam tip. The sense of smell, olfaction, is the only one of the 5 senses that does not pass through that sort of relay system, the thalamus that we talked about. It does not pass neural information through the thalamus. This is often a question on the AP exam. So the sense of smell is different than the others, probably due to something with our evolutionary past. It was one of the first most important components, senses, and sort of preceded the high development of our cerebral cortex. And so the process is a little bit different for our sense of smell. So how are taste, smell, and memory related? Information from the taste buds, as you can see over here on the yellow arrow, travel to an area between the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. This information registers near the brain, where the brain receives input from our sense of smell, which interacts with taste. So you may have noticed that your taste and smell input kind of can get mixed together. And smelling something can actually make something taste a little bit differently, which is fascinating and could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're smelling. So the brain circuitry for smell, that red area right there, also connects with areas involved in memory storage, which helps explain why a smell can trigger a memory. As I was saying, you know, when I smell something, it brings me straight back to, you know, being in my Nana's kitchen. This would explain why, because of the brain circuitry and how it's connected with our memory storage. So let's look at the research a little bit about this relationship. When put in a foul-smelling room, people expressed harsher judgments of other people and of immoral acts. So having, you know, smelling something bad can actually put you into a different mindset, into a different frame of mind. Exposed to a fishy smell, people become more suspicious. And when riding on a train car with the citrus scent of a cleaning product, people have left behind less trash. And we need to use those ideas in our own house, right? that smell, and there's a whole bunch of different products that have come out over the past, you know, couple decades, that have, you know, candles and different types of oils and stuff that have these companies have realized that the sense of smell does have a big effect on our emotions. How do we sense our body position and movement? So we have a kinesthetic sense and a vestibular sense. The kinesthetic sense is about position and motion detectors and muscles, tendons, and joints, and how they sense the position and movement of body parts. Vestibular sense is more the fluid, you know, the concern is with the fluid-filled semicircular canals and a pair of calcium crystal-filled vestibular sacs located in your ear. Remember, the fluid part of your ear monitors the head's and the body's movements. So this is how our body works to understand position and movement. And some of us might feel like we have really good understanding of our position in space, and some of us might not. So how do our senses interact? Our senses can interact and influence each other. Smells impact taste. As I said earlier, ever notice how bland food tastes when you have a cold? Yeah, I have. We cannot detect various tastes when we close our nose. There's certain tastes that we can't detect when we hold our nose. We see visual images better when they are accompanied by noise. We can hear soft sounds better if they're paired with a visual cue. So what's an example of a sensory interaction? We can hear soft sounds better when they're paired with a visual cue. So seeing the speaker forming the words, which Apple's FaceTime video chat feature allows, make those words easier to understand for hard of hearing listeners. So that's why it's really nice if you have some older relatives to be able to communicate with them through FaceTime or Zoom or all these different options that are now available to increase communication. So embodied cognition is the influence of bodily sensations, gestures, and other states on cognitive preferences and judgments. So there's a little bit of research on embodied cognition, and we're going to go over a few of the findings. After holding a warm drink rather than a cold one, people are more likely to rate someone more warmly, feel closer to them, and behave more generously. After being given the cold shoulder by others, people judge the room to be physically colder than did those who had been treated warmly. Okay, sitting at a wobbly desk and chair makes others' relationships or even one's own romantic relationship seem less stable. So these are really fascinating examples of research sort of supporting this idea of embodied cognition. Synesthesia. So there are certain people that seem to be able to experience like joint sensory sensations. So the brain circuits for two or more senses become joined in a phenomena called synesthesia, where the stimulation of one sense, such as hearing a sound, triggers an experience of another, such as seeing a color. Our younger son actually used to say this, that when he would see certain numbers, he would see colors. Synesthetes may hear music as colors or experience numbers as tastes. So it's almost like there's a mixing of two areas of their sensory system. So we are to our review. Let's review our learning targets. Describe the sense of touch. So our sense of touch is actually several senses. Remember, pressure, warmth, cold, and pain that combined to produce other sensations such as hot. The biopsychosocial model and how it affects our experience of pain. So the biopsychosocial perspective views our perception of pain as the sum of biological, psychological, and sociocultural influences. Pain reflects both that bottom-up sensation, such as input from our nociceptors, the sensory receptors that detect hurtful temperatures, pressure, or chemicals, and those top-down processes, such as experience, attention, and culture. They influence each other for our experience of pain. The gate control theory of pain is that a gate in the spinal cord either opens to permit pain signals traveling up small nerve fibers to reach the brain or closes to prevent their passage. The brain can also create pain as it does in phantom limb sensations. This phenomenon can affect the other senses as well. Very fascinating. So how about placebos? Pain treatments often combine physical and psychological elements, including placebos and distractions. Placebos have been shown through research to diminish the CNS system's attention and responses to painful experiences. Distraction can also be helpful. It seems to be able to activate neural pathways that inhibit pain and increase pain tolerance. So in terms of our other senses of smell, we have taste, which is gustation, and smell, which is olfaction, and they're both our chemical senses. Taste is a composite of sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. There are no basic sensations for smell. We have about 20 million olfactory receptors with about 350 different receptor proteins. In terms of our experiences of our body's position and movement, through kinesthesia, we sense the position and movement of our body parts. We monitor our body's position and movement and maintain our balance with our vestibular system to keep our balance. Remember, that has to do with your inner ear, which relies on the semicircular canals and vestibular sacs to sense the tilt or rotation of our head. So none of our senses, it's important for you to understand about the interaction of our senses. None of our senses operate in a vacuum. We experience sensory interaction. Their senses are influencing one another, and our brain blends the information our senses provide. And that informs our perceptions of the world. With synesthesia, the stimulation of one sense, such as hearing, seems to trigger an experience of another, such as seeing a color. And that can be different types of senses. It can be, it's not just hearing and seeing at the same time. It could be hearing and smell and all the other different mixtures of senses. The brain circuits that process physical sensations may interact with brain circuits responsible for cognition, leading to this idea of embodied cognition, which is the influences of our body sensations on our cognitive preferences and judgments. So that's, feeling cold or actually physically feeling something through your sensory system can actually change your emotions and how you're thinking about something, which is fascinating to think about. Okay, we are done for this module, and this is the last module within Unit 4, Sensation and Perception. Thank you for listening. Take care.